Hey, Andy.
Yeah. I was on the other line. Anyway, how are you?
I'm doing great. Have you been listening to me kind of, just fill all the white space while we're waiting for 9 o'clock to show up?
Yeah, I've been on the line for the last 7 minutes, but there's a lot of different pin numbers, et cetera, with this thing, so I find
Yes.
Anyway, it's all good.
Figured out. Yeah. Okay, well, we're just going to kind of go into it, and wanted to say to welcome again to everybody who's logged in live. There's a good group of people who are listening live, and that's going to be awesome. And we have Andy Park. So, Andy, you're just probably about 20 minutes away from where I am here in Langley, BC, and we're experiencing the closing of summer and the onslaught of a little bit colder autumn season, and soon it will be winter and Christmas and all of that. So just a little kind of backstory on Andy and I. We actually go to the same church on Sunday nights, a little fellowship called The River, maybe 50 or 60 people, and Andy's found many times there with a few musicians behind him leading worship. He's one of several worship leaders there, and it's a very relaxed, spirit-filled kind of culture. So Sunday night we had a time of fellowship and meal and all of that, and it was nice. Andy and I came and sat together at the table, and we're just chatting together. So that's part of our personal world. Not to mention, every now and then I'll get a text from Andy be like, "Hey Ryan, you up for a game of golf on Friday?" So we do enjoy a few games like that and kind of battle it out. Yeah. However, I think, as I remember, Andy, sometimes when we go golfing, we sort of drop the scorecard and just, hit the balls because we get frustrated after about the second hole. And so if you don't know the score, then, then you're all good.
Golf is a very humbling game. It's one of God's many ways to keep us humble in life, So
totally.
Yeah, totally. A lot of good fun, but golf is a wonderful and difficult game. So
awesome. And where are you right now, Andy? Are you calling from your home office?
I'm in my home office right here. And
you guys
beautiful thing today. And
good. And you've been out on the road for the last couple of days. Anyways, why don't you just bring us up to speed a little bit on your most recent kind of venture away and kind of what brings you to today, current. So where were you in the last few days?
Well, I was for a whole week in Atlantic Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and it was a great time. I was hosted by my good friend Larry Levy. He was the pastor of the Halifax Vineyard Church, and we had various events through the week. An interchurch event on Wednesday night attended by people from all over that area and many different churches, and did a young adults and youth retreat on the weekend, and saw some of the beautiful coastline there. And it is really unusually warm there right now. So it was beautiful weather. Went swimming in the ocean, and the Atlantic there was warmer than the Pacific here that I swam in just a month ago. So, so it was great. Another pastor from a vineyard church in New Jersey was there, and that was hanging out with him, a guy named Craig Simonian, and it was a really good time. Yeah, and
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the word vineyard comes out every now and then in your conversation as you're talking, so I don't know if everybody knows some of the history about where you've come, and I thought, why don't we just take a little bit of time to, just let people know a bit of your backstory and how you came around into the whole world of music and worship, and, your family's all kind of been alongside with you. You've got 8 kids, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
8 kids?
Do.
and a wife, so that's a full household. And now you're starting to add, wives and daughter-in-laws and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure you're going to have big family gatherings in the future of the Park household.
You bet.
I certainly have great memories of you being even a part of my own world of coming into the world of worship music, especially in the early 90s when you were doing a lot of writing and the Touching the Father's Heart album series and some great songs that you were coming out with, The River is Here and many others like that. So you were very much a part of the world with John Wimber, the late John Wimber, when he was, having a significant impact in our world of churches and ministry and stuff like that. So for me, Andy, I just wanted to say it's such an honor to have you here. It's kind of unique because now I see you as, sort of a friend and comrade and golf partner and, someone who is part of my church and just a part of the regular world. But 15 or so years ago, you were, that guy in California writing these amazing songs, and I was listening to your albums and just super inspired and captured in my own times of worship, listening to your songs. And so now sometimes I just think, wow, it's amazing how, life kind of comes around and here you are, you're just a regular guy, just like me. Imagine that, hey? So
that's right.
So anyways, I just wanted to tell you that I have deep admiration for you and really sort of count you as one of the, as an important person in the world of worship, especially, in the history of more modern worship. And you've contributed significantly through your songs and teaching, and you've got a couple of books and continue to teach. And so the theme that we wanted to talk about today, leading worship through the seasons of life and just recognizing that, I'm sure you're not 25 or even 30 anymore. You're getting on in your years, as I am, and yet you're still very active as a musician and worship leader, and I'm sure many people listening are in a similar kind of, they're either, getting on in their years or they're going to get there eventually. And, so we want to have a good, encouraging outlook on staying for the long haul in our faith and in our ministries. So why don't you take us back, say 20, 25 years or so, give us sort of the flyover of Andy's life, back to your maybe late teenage years and the early years of John Wimber and the Vineyard movement and some of those early recordings that were very significant in shaping our newer world of contemporary and modern worship.
Yeah, well, it started when I was 17. I was just getting going with studying at UCLA. I grew up in Los Angeles, and just in the summer prior to that, I really encountered God in a real powerful way for the first time ever. I was raised in the church. I was raised in the Episcopal Church in Los Angeles, and I definitely believed in God, but the penny dropped then when I was 17, and I entered a Christian fraternity house, actually my first year there at UCLA, and was going to various Bible studies, and I started writing songs immediately, and I had never intended to do that, but looking back, it's definitely a gift that God gave me. I mean, I'm still astonished today as I write songs. I mean, not all the songs I write are that great, but some of them are good, and some, you can tell by the response of people, and sometimes I'm not always the best judge of which songs are really going to get legs and be adopted by a larger number of people, but that does continue to happen, and it's just a gift, it's an amazing amazing privilege to have been involved in writing hundreds of songs and traveling to, 35 countries to be exact, to lead worship and share on worship and other subjects. And still doing it. I'm going to be heading down to South America next month and then India in November. And I began in the Vineyard Church, like right in that first year at UCLA, and way back in '75, and started absorbing everything I could. At that time I was listening to a lot of Maranatha music and people like Graham Kendrick and some of the Hosanna Integrity music, and so that all shaped me, and I didn't really have...
Keith Green, he was part of that era too, right? Keith Green?
In fact, Keith was in my church. I actually went to a Bible study led by Keith one time. He actually lived very near where I grew up, and I was a brand new Christian, 17 years old. I was kind of in awe of him, as a musician and just a spiritual leader. He was actually an elder in the Vineyard Church that I was a part of for a few years there before he moved down to Texas. And he had a big impact on me, and second chapter of Acts, and groups like that. So I started leading worship right away in a small group in that first year there in Westwood, California, and before too long I was leading in larger groups, and I was writing songs like crazy, and so I began by making little cassette recordings and singing in local churches around town, and I did that kind of a thing for 10 years. Before having any songs published, in a larger way, I was in 1983. I moved up to Santa Barbara. I felt strongly led by the Lord to go help with a church plant that was starting up there, a Vineyard Church, and so that was kind of the step before moving to Canada in 1985, and to help with another vineyard plant up here, and in that first year in Canada, I started leading worship in conferences where John Wimber was teaching, and he began taking me around with him to, we went to England and Ireland in '86, and just kind of all over the U.S. and that was the beginning of an exciting journey of seeing God do all kinds of things. I mean, obviously the worship music is kind of my area of specialty, but it comes in the larger package of trying to live a kingdom life and praying for people and being prayed for by people and seeing God heal people, being healed by God. In fact, I was healed. It was significant chronic tendonitis issue in my arms and hands just last November. I'd say about a 2/3 healing, maybe 3/4. Prior to that, I would be in pain after just 20 minutes of guitar playing or any other activity with my hands and arms, like whatever, doing the dishes, gardening, whatever, even computer work. I start aching very quickly. But I got prayed for one night and felt like a strong current of electricity go through my body. Just, nobody was touching me when that happened. I was just sitting there in my seat. This is the church you just described that both you and I are a part of. So it's exciting to see God move and be the recipient of just supernatural intervention. And it's kind of like he was saying, here, I want to relieve you of this pain, but I also want to give you lots more years of using your hands to serve me. And so now I can play guitar as long as I want. There might be a little bit of aching, but it's not. It's a whole different thing now. So
you're
that was
saying in the earlier years, as you were like traveling with Wimber and then coming back to Canada and you were definitely experiencing a touch of God uniquely in your life. That the music was a part of it, but it wasn't just all about the music and writing great songs and getting them distributed and all of that. You were definitely because certainly I think that even the Vineyard Church as a whole was certainly one tool that God was using to just challenge the wider church that God's presence and His Holy Spirit, and He wants to do some things in people's lives that perhaps those of us, and I'm a part of a Mennonite Brethren background, and whether we're Baptist or the more conservative evangelical sort of, this was all kind of new. And I remember going on university and hearing about these vineyards, and it's like, what's that, John Wimber? Crazy things are going on and all of that. But so you're giving us a bit of a window from the inside, and you're saying you came out of Episcopal, so you came out of a very conservative background as well. But that's right. Depends on your life. So go ahead.
Yeah, I actually still, and I lead worship even in the last, say, 2 months. I've led worship in an Anglican church in Southern California, and a whole variety of different denominations, and so I'm used to interacting with people from all kinds of churches, and we have a lot in common, and there's a lot of overlap between the way we do things, and this it wasn't like that 40 years ago when I started leading worship. It was there's a lot more separation. I mean, people heard the word vineyard and they thought, oh, what is that? Some kind of cult, and many of them didn't realize that they were already singing our songs, even if they thought we were a cult. But that's changed a long time ago, and people understand that we're an evangelical movement with a charismatic experience, and so I mean, I think obviously one of the reasons why contemporary worship styles have replaced more traditional worship styles, or at least augmented the traditional aspects of many historic denominations, is that people want a real experience with God. There's no substitute for knowing God, for intimacy with God, for being the recipient of what Paul prays in Ephesians 1 and 3, of knowing the love of God, knowing the power that raised Jesus from the dead, and so, I mean, that happens in all kinds of churches, in all kinds of denominations every week, and people have different labels and different ways they describe that experience, but God is, He's no respecter of denominations. He loves us all the same, and so it enriches me to rub shoulders with people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and I continue to learn from the Lord and from others as I participate in different worship traditions. And
So let's just talk a little more as we kind of thinking about the whole seasons of life, and I think I'm just going to be bold enough to ask, how old are you now? What's your age?
No problem. Yeah, I'm 57. Yeah. So actually,
57.
Next month is the 40th anniversary of my worship leading.
Wow.
Years. I started awesome. In October of 40 years ago, leading worship in a small group, and
I'm not assuming that everybody listening here is, in the 50s or, 60s or whatever. I'm sure some people are, but one thing that connects us all is if you're not, 50 or 60 right now, you're likely going to be, sometime in your life, and it's that's why we want this time to be, encouraging and give you perspective on just pressing on for the long haul, and I think it's tremendously encouraging, Andy, that you have that you stayed relevant and committed to your calling as a musician. And I can just imagine that a lot of worship leaders or worship pastors who are watching, the young generation, the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds taking over, the worship leader positions perhaps, or even just the technology and all the lights and cameras, and it just baffles me even. I just kind of sometimes think, I just want an acoustic guitar and a little string pad and I'm good to go, just give me a great melody, and so anyways, it's just encouraging just to know that you're, but let's kind of look back a little, and think through some of the seasons, because there was like a heightened era, the Andy Park, when the Vineyard, you travel in the world writing songs or getting kind of worldwide adoption, and then there's this kind of ebb and flow, and I just know this because I know you, that it's not always kind of been like that, and you've waded through some different seasons. So why don't you just kind of talk us through that a little bit, and maybe in the last 15 and 20 years, what that's looked like in particular, as well as you've raised a family and seen your kids and trained them up as musicians and worship leaders, and kind of you've got that real generational kind of outlook as well, training and mentoring. So walk us through that world a little bit as to what it's been like in the last 20 years for you.
Yeah, well, even going all the way to the beginning, if you take it into three sections of 10 and 15 and 15 years, I'd say the first 10 years of my walk with the Lord in worship leading, it was all about foundations. It's all about building character, getting to know God, really getting my motives purified, just maturing as a believer. In those first 10 years, like I said, wrote hundreds of songs and did several homegrown recordings. Then in the next 15 years, I started recording with Vineyard, and the stuff was going around the world, and I was going around the world, and playing on a lot of big stages, and those conferences, by the way, were attended mostly by non-Vineyard people. They were attended by people from all kinds of denominations, and then, the conferencing definitely slowed way down about in the last 15 years. I mean, I'm a part of conferences all the time, but they're not on big, huge stages. And so, there's definitely, life is a test and life is a trust. So in every one of those phases, I'm tested to take the next step in an integrous way. And so when I was leading worship in a local church with no, visibility beyond the local church, that was a test to be faithful with what God had given me. I had early on in my early 20s, I did kind of the typical thing of approaching record companies with my material and hoping to get some kind of deal, and that never happened. But like 90-something% of all of us, that's not part of the worship experience anyway. We're mostly all local church worship leaders, but then when things did blow up, and I was had a lot more visibility, that's a test, because okay, now that people know your name and you're traveling and they're singing your songs all over the place, what are you going to do with that? And I had to constantly repent from any self-aggrandizing and just get back to knowing God, get back to loving the Lord with all my heart. And when man is tested by the praise he receives, that's a scripture from the book of Proverbs. And so keeping your head low and coming back to why did I get into this in the first place, and why am I doing this? And that really, and then the whole competition issue, because unless you are really seeking the Lord with all your heart and not seeking to please people, you get into the competition thing with, okay, how am I doing compared to these other worship leaders, and so I think one of the reasons I've been able to keep going strong as the size of the audience has waned, and is that I repented from when, bad motives, bad thoughts, bad behaviors, and I'm doing it for the love of the Lord. I'm doing it to please God. And so, now I do many of my involvements in worship ministry are volunteer involvements in local churches here, and this trip I just did, that was a volunteer thing, and going places like India. You don't do that to get paid. You do that because the Lord said do it, and so and so of course my experience sort of parallels what's happened in the Vineyard movement, in that it used to be one of the kind of big players on the international scene of record companies. But it's really not. It's definitely a contributor. There's a lot of good music that's being recorded every year by, in both U.S. and the U.K., and now Vineyard Music Canada has started back up again in the last several months. But it's not about, how, your market value or your position. It's there's this strange intersection of worship and commercial business, and so you always have to come back to doing it for the right reasons, and so I've also been a part of many local churches, because part of my calling, part of the nature of the Vineyard Church as a church planting movement is starting new churches. And so I've been a part of several church plants, and many of which thrived and flourished, and a few in the last few years which didn't really go anywhere, and so being a part of very small churches that struggled to get off the ground, and one of them lasted several years. It was a fruitful church. The other one never really did get off the ground. You're definitely, you're leading worship in small groups, and sometimes in those groups, a small percentage of the people either A, can sing, or B, want to sing. And so you've got 8 or 10 people sitting in a circle, and my voice is 5 times as loud as the sum total of all of the other 7 voices. That's a challenging situation in which to lead worship. And anybody who's been doing it for any length of time, you have those kinds of experiences. So a year ago, it was really great to come into the River Church, which is actually Linda and I, my wife and I, followed our several of our kids into this church, and the worship there is very dynamic. It's a church loaded with a lot of young adults, and I mean, I have most of my kids would be classified as young adults. They're the oldest, Zachary. He'll be 29 next month. He's one of the few people that are not a part of this church called the River, but he's involved in the worship team in his church. And I lead worship at the River about once every 6 weeks, and I lead once every 6 weeks or so at the Abbotsford Vineyard, and probably on an average of 2 or 3 Sundays, maybe 2 Sundays out of every 6 weeks, I'm in some other city leading worship and teaching. And so, and the songwriting thing, this recording I just did now, we did the live part of the recording at the end of December, and the project was just released last month. That was the first brand new recording project I've done in several years. 2008 really was the last full-length release I did. I did one in Spanish that came out in 2010. But many times over the last 10 years, I've said to the Lord, whatever you want. Like, I don't need to keep writing songs. I don't need to keep making recordings. But really, it is the right thing for me to do. And when you lay something down several times and it keeps bouncing back and opportunities present themselves, then go for it. It's undeniable that God is still with me, inspiring me, and I think part of what it's easy to buy into in church worship leading is the world's model of discriminating against older people in music, in performing. I mean, if you want to describe worship as part of the performing arts, even though primarily we're worshiping, but we are performing. And so basically, the world worships young, attractive singers, right? And if you really get established, then people will keep listening to you into your later years of life. And then, we see some exaggerated examples of that, of guys that tour into their 70s and even their 80s. But it's really a ridiculous notion that your worship leading career should end, in your 40s or something. I mean, why? If, you still have health, and why would you quit? You actually continue to get better as a musician if you keep doing it through your 40s and 50s. I was just looking at a post of a friend from England, a guy named Bryn Howarth, who is widely acclaimed slide guitarist, and he's, I'd say, late 60s, and he's doing new recordings, and it's and part of the key here is in a church like the River that I'm a part of, you learn what people are singing at any given point in the life of the church. And so I've learned many songs, in the last few years of, the last 1 year especially, leading in two local churches that have lots of young adults, and they are listening to, a lot of Bethel music and Jesus culture music, along with, music out of England, of course, Matt Redman and, all the best known writers. And so when I lead worship, I've never done mostly my own material, because that just doesn't work unless you are a Chris Tomlin, and so everybody knows all your music. And so in order to serve the church, you have to do a lot of familiar material. But again, I've been enriched in my own worship life by learning and using material by many younger writers, and then in addition to that, I write my own songs. And then I see, okay, which ones really work in church, and I use the ones that really work. And sometimes I'm surprised which ones do work. But getting back to the subject of ups and downs, I like to look at the life of King David and as an example of somebody who experienced all kinds of just turmoil, a lot of conflict. Obviously, he was the king. It was a different time in history, so there was military conflict, and so that is not something I have to deal with. But there are, obviously, the church is full of people, and wherever there are people, there's going to be conflict, and so if I look back, even in the best of times, the most dynamic kind of periods of my life, that we were just talking about, there's always people doing stupid things around you. There's always people saying things, doing things that are hurtful and wrong, and people will let you down. It doesn't matter what kind of a church you're in. You're going to have to practice the act of forgiving people and loving people who haven't really earned the right to be loved. And so, we bear one another's burdens, and in so doing, we fulfill the law of Christ. That was a verse I just read yesterday in my daily reading. And people, we're all just doing our best to move forward in our walk with Christ. And so part of hanging in there as a worship leader is forgiving people when they do wrong, and when you're underappreciated, when people don't realize what you're investing and how much you have, you're pouring out. This could be in any setting. This could be in church, could be in your family. And so Jesus was the most underappreciated person I can think of in history. Obviously he was treated, he received the punishment that we deserved, right? And so that, and so again, if you go back to what is my reason for being here, and what are my life goals, and if it's to please the Lord, and if I realize that the servant is not above his master, then you're going to go through hard times. You're going to be hurt, and things are going to change. life situations change, and like one of the specifics about our situation is because we have been a part of so many church plants, we have moved a lot in life, not so much in the last 15, 20 years, but before that we moved a lot to be, a part of where we felt God was leading us. And so we've left behind many friends, all up and down, in different churches in Southern California and in the greater Vancouver area here in Canada. And so you leave behind established relationships, and then you have to make new relationships, and so and of course that's one place where family comes in. I mean, that's the one thing that does stay constant no matter where you move, and I am really blessed. I mean, I've seen a few pictures of the kids here on the screen, and all of my kids are following the Lord, and some of them, had a few years away from the Lord. They've all been back for around 2 or 3 years now at least, and it's many of them participate with me now in leading worship. We're going to be doing a little conference over on Vancouver Island first weekend in October, and the whole band is the kids and I. 4 of the kids and I will be heading over for that, and so actually 5 will come. Lizzie, the youngest, she won't play in the band yet, but by the way, my wife, Linda, who you can see right there on the screen now, is she had as much to do with mentoring my kids as being a homeschooling teacher. She felt called to raise up worshipers, and so her main reason for doing homeschooling was to disciple the kids in their walk with God, and then of course the academics. But and so it's pretty awesome to see all of them actively engaged in church and serving in different ways. And the last 2, Ian and Elizabeth, are still taking music lessons. 3 of my older kids teach music as part of their work, and we have everything from opera to jazz, into classical, and what the kids have studied, and so
Andy, as I'm listening to your story, and just I appreciate you sharing about the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs. And I think what I'm taking from this is, whoever you are listening to this, and I'm listening to this too, as I'm 45 years old and thinking about the next 15 or 20 years, and life may have its ups and downs, but one thing we can have control on, I suppose, is just determining to be faithful in whatever the season is that we're in. And I'm hearing that in your life. That, you've been on the stages with 2,000, and you've been sitting in a room with a dozen people and nobody really singing. And it's the same Andy Park, and you have to be faithful in both places. And you can't get faithfulness from anybody else. Nobody can give you that. Nobody can put that on you. You have to decide, and you really don't know if you're faithful until you've been in both places. Like if you've been on the big stage, which some of us may be on big stages, some of us may not be on big stages, but when the audience isn't big. I remember I had one circumstance where I was invited to lead worship with a band at the end of a conference, and they closed out the conference, and we got up on the stage ready to lead worship, and everybody left. Literally the whole place emptied out, and we led worship to nobody.
Yeah.
And it was, in my memory, it was one of the best times of worship I've ever had, because I was just like so ready. And our sound kind of echoed in this empty auditorium because everybody thought it was over. And it was just, we've all got those probably stories in our lives where it's like you said, the test and the trust. But what will you do in the test when there are no accolades and no one's singing and there's only a couple people and they barely care, but do you still press through? And it's those people that still have something to say from when they're 20 through to when they're 55 and 60, because, the accolades and the massive crowds and all of that are not the barometer of your worthiness or your acceptance. And so anyways, I'm just kind of reflecting back to you some things I'm hearing as I'm, kind of taking in your story. And I know you as a person. I see this. I've talked with you, on the golf course and places where you're telling me about, a church that's not really, on fire or not going. You don't know if it's working out and I just kind of feel like it's encouraging, for someone like you to share those stories and just sort of peel back some of the reality of this life that we all have to kind of engage in. And I see you with your kids. I see, a lot of the pictures that we're seeing come. I actually sat yesterday and went through some of your videos that are all available on YouTube, and I just made a bunch of pictures. But this is from this recording you just did, and a number of your kids are in that. Jessica just did a fabulous rendition of that, My Portion. I just think, wow, what a testament, you and your daughter doing a song like that together, and you just must make you feel so proud having your boys and kids and all of that. Like, that's really, I'd take that over 20,000 people, listening to me singing some song. That's a beautiful thing. Why don't you just, because we only have maybe 20 minutes left or 10 minutes or so, but give us a little bit about this album, Breath of Heaven, and how that kind of came about. And maybe we could just talk about one or two songs that really stand out for you as, new, fresh contributions to the world of worship music and representing your season of life right now. So give us a little window on that album. Yep.
Yeah, the one you just mentioned, My Portion, I just felt real strongly led that Jessica should sing that, and got just tons of good feedback on that song. It's a simple worship song, of honestly pouring out your heart to the Lord, and the word "my portion," that has to do with what's going to satisfy me. What's my treasure? That's another word used in the chorus. Different phrases from different places in the Psalms, are used in it. And you can check it out on the Vineyard Canada website or YouTube. And
I would just want to really encourage people. We just actually put it in our Praise Charts blog, so if you go to our blog, we've got it in there. But definitely, especially after listening to this time with Andy, and to sort of, pull it all together and just set that video on and close the door in your office, turn up the sound, and just, let God's presence kind of fill in. It's stunning. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, the other one I'd mentioned is the title track, Breath of Heaven, which is, the lead vocal on that is done by Tracy Ron, who's one of the worship leaders at the Abbotsford Vineyard, which is a larger vineyard, by Canadian standards, it's larger anyway. She's a top-notch vocalist, and boy, does she ever kill it on this recording with that song. And she's just doing on the recording the same thing she does every Sunday at church. And it was actually, the project has 4 different lead vocalists, Jesse, Tracy, and I, and a guy named Travis Thurrow, who I've been doing some co-writing with over the last few years. And he's in his mid-30s, you know, one of the Sunday worship leaders there at Abbotsford Vineyard, and very talented guy, and lots of potential to just keep writing lots of great songs in the years to come. Yeah, and these, you know, the Breath of Heaven tune I wrote just last fall as part of this really powerful time of God's visitation, just meeting me powerfully in my, you know, personal worship and songwriting times, and so he just, you know, got a hold of me and sovereignly met with me on many occasions in the last half of last year and early part of this year, and I mean, it's still happening. That was a particular period of 4 to 6 months where it was just kind of overwhelming in a good way. And actually, looking back, you know, if you see the seasons of where I wrote songs like In the Secret and The Rivers Here, it was the same story. You know, it was times of spiritual refreshing that I was experiencing as a microcosm of what was happening in the larger church, you know, not just my local church, but the movement of churches I was a part of. And when I'm immersed in what God is doing and saying, and swept up into personal worship and corporate church worship, that's when I write more songs. And so it's just what comes out of me. I'll give you a funny quote from Mozart, and I'm not implying that I'm anything like a Mozart, but Mozart said, "As a sow piddles, I write." And so he just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and I don't think it was a comment of him saying that was the worth of his songs. Obviously, you know, incredibly gifted and well appreciated for hundreds of years. But when you're called to do something, you do a lot of it. You know, you have to set your hand to the plow. But and like I said earlier, it doesn't mean everything you write is great. But when I get with God, I just naturally write songs. Many of them are just for me. They're not meant for a wider audience. But anyway, it's awesome to just the gift of music. I mean, it's, you know, it's what Praise Chart is making available, and it's a way of meeting with God and helping other people meet with God. And it's
what I'm hearing you say, because you know, you were mentioning that it's a gift, and some people, you know, if they say, oh, you know, it's me, it's just a gift, that would sound like self, you know, grandiosing or whatever. But with you, I think you're really saying it's, you know, I didn't earn this. And certainly you have worked at your craft of songwriting, but you're recognizing the Lord gave you something. You put a calling on your life, and you just put the plow to the ground, and you just do it. And you're faithful, and you do it when you're 20, you do it when you're 30, you do it when you're 40, you do it for the big crowd and the little crowd, and you just stay faithful, and you know, and hopefully, you know, have less and less, like, don't complain and don't begrudge, you know, people, you know, have forgotten about me and they don't appreciate, you know, whatever. You just be faithful. And I'm kind of speaking now as I'm summarizing to anyone listening and whoever might listen to this is just an encouragement that the Lord's got a calling on your life and He's given you a gift. Then just want to encourage you to be faithful. I'm in that world now, and I'm recognizing, some of what the Lord gave me, this passion for the praise charts thing. And I mean, I love it. I can't wait for Monday to get down to my office and start dreaming up the next thing for what that world is going to look like. But the other thing I'll just say, and I relate to you in this, is the Lord called me to be a worship leader and a musician, and I don't get paid to do that anymore. I don't have a staff title. I don't have anything, but I'm just like, I have to and want to be a part of this world of making music and bringing people into the presence of God. And, and I don't sing for big crowds anymore, like less than 100, definitely, if there's any opportunity. But I want to keep doing this. I still want to do it in another 10 or 15, 20 years. I love music, and I love the presence of God in worship. And I also love engaging with guys like you that are walking the same road and are just staying faithful like that. And I want to kind of lift you up in some ways and just honor you. So, thank you. Anyways, I appreciate you as a friend, and I know that you have mentored and guided along many worship leaders, and I hope that people listening today feel encouraged. That I think what I'm hearing and sensing is something about this. You can't get it from someone else. Someone else isn't going to give you this choice to be faithful and true to your calling. You have to just hear that from the Lord and then own it, and press on and stay faithful, and hopefully hearing stories like we've heard today from you is just, sometimes you need that little bit of juice to kind of keep going. Like, it's worth it to stay on track. So
that's right.
Thanks for that, and I think just maybe as we close, I'll give you an opportunity, Andy, to pray for those of us who are listening, and just imagine, there's probably some guys who are in their 50s or 60s, and some guys who are in their 20s, and and they all need this word today. Some encouragement. I bet you there's some guys listening who are a little on the frustrated side, and maybe there's pressure on staff, or their job is at risk. And, all that kind of stuff, I'm sure, is on the dock. So why don't you take a few minutes and just minister and pray to them as they're listening, and we'll close out kind of like that.
Sure, okay. Lord, thank you for the privilege of serving you in worship, and I pray for all who are listening, whether now or whenever, that we would first of all be worshipers of you before we're leading anybody else, that we would continue to seek you with all of our heart and soul and strength and mind, that we would honor you with our time, with our energy, with our money, with our skills, in our relationships. Lord, help us to keep worshiping no matter how we feel. Help us not to buy into the lie of the world that, it's all about how you feel. We know that you call us to sometimes walk on the mountaintop and sometimes walk in the valley. And help us to be faithful in the valley. Help us to be loyal to you, no matter what's happening, no matter how many people notice what we're doing. And I pray for people listening to have a fresh encounter with you through the gift of music, whether that's just going on a walk and singing as they go, or in their car, or sitting down with their instrument and playing an ancient hymn or a new course or writing something. I pray for those that are tired and weary and just lacking vision for the next year. I pray that you would inject new wisdom, new vision, a fresh.
You are now unmuted. You are now muted.
Hey, it's Ryan here. Andy, are you still there? I'm not sure what happened. Can you guys hear me? Somebody in the chat say that they can hear me. Okay. So, well, that's just one of those awkward moments at the end. I guess as Andy was closing his prayer, my sound just totally went dead, and I don't know what happened. Could have been the platform that we're using, but I'm sorry for that. And we seem to have lost Andy, but we were closing anyway. So thanks to those of you who have stayed with us, and I trust that you found that to be a really encouraging time, and it was a great kind of very real, heartfelt prayer at the end. So it's unfortunate that we closed out that way, but at any rate, we got the best of it. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate all of you who are listening in, and just want to be an encouragement to you in your season of life that you're in, whatever that is. So we have this whole time recorded, and it's going to be available tomorrow. I don't know if we'll be able to repair the ending like that. Maybe we'll just do a nice smooth fade out, with some music. Just be like the classic end of a worship service. How about that? And and then the other thing I wanted to mention outside of the archive is that next week we're also going to do another interview with One Sonic Society, and that is going to be amazing, with Jason Ingram and Paul Mabry. You probably know Jason's name, probably know both of them quite a bit, but if you would look them up as songwriters, they have their hands in a lot of really great songs. And the one thing I really like about Jason in particular, because I end up hearing his voice more, and we've done at least one, if not two, interviews with him in the past. He's a really great guy to talk to, very personable, very real, and down to earth, much like Andy has been today. So he's got a lot to say, in particular about songwriting. That is definitely a craft and a gift that God's given him, and Paul Mabry. So come and join us then. Hopefully we won't cut out at the end. But that's it. That's about a wrap for us for today. Appreciate all of you. And as far as your questions, I was looking for the questions, and I think I just wasn't quite getting them at the end, so I just kind of let Andy continue. But normally what you would do is put them in the Ask a Question thing, or you can send them to info@praisecharts.com, and we will pass those on to Andy and maybe just give him an opportunity to reply back to you, but we're at the end of our hour now. And just looking at the home page now, I don't know if many of you have heard that we've been working for the last couple of years on a new version of Praise Charts, and that's an image screenshot of our new home page. And so that's just the very tip of the iceberg. We've redesigned a lot of the pages and tried to make it a much more modern, less cluttered kind of flow through, and I think you're going to really appreciate that. So inside the next 7 to 14 days, somewhere in there, you can watch, and we are going to post the whole site to beta.praisecharts.com. And basically it will be what we would call a public beta state, where you could go, you can log in with your account and experience that world, but it won't be the priority site. It won't be the first site until we get all the bugs kind of worked out and just make sure that it works on all different platforms. And it's also very adaptable to your phones and tablets and all that kind of stuff. So super exciting. We've put like hundreds, thousands of hours into this, and lots of resource. Probably started this project about 2 years ago and been through many design versions and iterations. So that's been exciting, and you can watch for that. So that will be at beta.praisecharts.com, and you will get notified when that becomes available. So anyways, that's about a wrap. There's a shot of Andy. There's his album. We have the charts for that album on Praise Charts. And if you go to the blog, we have many of the videos that were recorded when they recorded the album. They're very great, personal, nice, relaxed environment in a sort of a barn. They were up in the sort of the top floor of a barn that was been converted into a studio space. So that's that. All right, I think I'm going to close out. I see that there's a few people still hanging around. Gord and Jennifer, Lynn, Marty, Paul, Roger, and Charlene, and maybe Andy's still listening in and wondering how does he log back into this thing. But I will give him a call and tell him that we closed it out just fine. So it's all good. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week.